You're listening to the Business of Pharmacy podcast with me, your host, Mike Kelzer. Kristin, for those that haven't come across you online, introduce yourself and tell our listeners what we're talking about today.
My name is Kristin Tallent. I am the CEO of a wellness clinic called Shore Integrative Health, and I'm also the CEO of another company called Collaborative Therapeutics. Today, we're going to talk about going from being an employee, pretty much corporate America, to an employer, and the different things I've learned along the way.
You took off from corporate America. Now you're doing your own thing. You're going to end right back up in corporate America, but you're going to be leading it. What did you learn from the corporates that you say, I'll never do that though, I'm going to be different?
How they treat their employees, 1000%, because that was one of the things that I absolutely hated about working for larger corporations and even some of the smaller companies that I worked for. I just really felt like they didn't truly value their employees and the sacrifice and hard work that people put in on a day-to-day basis. And the amount of time that they give up from their own personal lives to give to that company. And I don't truly feel like it's appreciated a lot of the time. And so that is definitely something that I'm striving to create in my own business. But I have to be honest, it is really not a very easy thing to do.
Kristin, devil's advocate here. Did you get paid when you were in the corporation? And are you paying your employees now? And so tough, 2 weeks for 2 weeks pay. What's all this hand-holding? What's all this appreciation stuff?
I cannot stand when people say, well, at least you have a job. You could say that for everything. We could get a job doing how many millions of different things, really, from how many millions of different people. But especially when you're working for smaller entities, you see their families, you see their lifestyle, you see where they're spending their time a little bit more. And so you start to see that, maybe you're putting in more time than that person. And the least you want is a little bit of appreciation. You want to feel that sense that they appreciate the sacrifice that you're making in your own life to not only grow and build their business, but then, support their life and their lifestyle that they have.
I think sometimes family is almost worse in businesses because I think sometimes you get these big businesses and it's like, okay, I'm one of the 1,000 employees and there's the CEO who's millions upon millions of dollars and you almost disassociate yourself with them. You're like, well, they're so far up that do what they want. I don't love my job, but I got a job. But in a family business, it's almost like you can have 10 of you there and all of a sudden, there's 7 in the family. It's like, all right, we're going to Hawaii this week or something like that. And they deserve it, but it's so close sometimes.
They do. And it is. And I've worked for 2 very different kinds of people. I've worked for the one that just showers you and showers your employee there. He showered his employees with so much love and respect and monetary things, whether it was bonuses or tickets to something, and just the sense of gratitude and how the friendliness of that environment was totally different than maybe someone else who, I was lucky if I got an annual raise or a Christmas bonus. And everybody's moved by different things, Everybody, not everybody wants a bonus or not everybody wants more vacation time, but those conversations weren't even happening.
I think that's a trick of a good boss/owner is sometimes people don't want that warmth. They want more money or they want this or they want that. And it's a hard conversation because you don't want to go to your employees and say, what would you like more of? And they say, I want more of this. And you're like, no, that's not going to happen. But there's different incentives for different people.
Absolutely. And figuring out how to kind of work that into the system, into your business and your workflow, and figuring out what each individual employee wants, and then finding the happy medium. It's really tricky.
I've been trying to figure this out. What professions is it okay to have a really nice car, and which ones is it better not to as a boss? So for example, it's best when I come into work that I leave my Jaguar at home and I pull up in my, my old Chevy or something like that. It's just a better look. It's a better look for customers. It's a better look for employees. It's just a better look. However, if you're in another business, there's other businesses where you want to see the success of that person. We used to have this little drive-through hamburger place. All they had was like burger and fries. The burgers were like 50 cents and the fries were like 50 cents, something like that. This is like 10 years ago. And I saw the owner pull up one time and he was driving this deluxe car. I mean, this guy was so rich, he wasn't even wearing socks. You know the type? You know what I'm saying? He had his loafers on and stuff. He didn't wear socks. And I thought, oh, that guy's rich. But I didn't really care. I don't care because the burgers are 50 cents. There's some businesses where it looks better if you have a real good car. I don't know what that would be exactly. Maybe if you're like one of those hospital chasing attorneys, the type that everybody hates. But those guys, it's good if they have a really nice looking car because the people that hire them to win their cases, they look at them and they say, that's who I want to fight for me. So there's some that should look big and nice and there's some that don't. I'm just relating that to watching your boss, especially if it's a tight knit thing and like how they're living. And it's really none of your damn business, but it does affect you. Yeah,
no, it's not any of our business whatsoever. But I think previously being an employee and now being an employer, you see both sides of it very clearly. And I just remember certain instances where I didn't care about that because you felt the appreciation and you cared more about it when you didn't feel the appreciation. So I don't, and I agree with you. I think healthcare in general, especially when you're in specific niches, they don't want to see the really nice car that you're driving because then they feel like you're taking advantage of them. And everybody associates healthcare with it should be covered by my insurance and it should be free. So if you're driving around in some really nice vehicle, I think that could be maybe taken in a negative light. But also, I can't help but think of Dave Ramsey because he's all about paying off your vehicles and driving some beat down car because you're putting your money in other more advantageous areas. And so I look at it a little differently. I see that really expensive car and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but what does all the other financial pieces of that person's life look like? Whereas that crappy car they might be driving around might mean that they have a really, really nice 401k or a couple extra houses. I don't know.
Now that you're a big shot and you've got all your employees, what are you driving up in? Don't give me the model of the car. Just tell me, is it a status symbol for you? Is it a status symbol to let other pharmacists know how well you're doing so maybe they'll join in and want to learn from you and how you did this business? Or are you on purpose like dumbing it down?
So I drive a Mazda SUV. And I look at things differently than I think a lot of people. I am not one to put on some kind of fake persona, especially with all the social media that we have going on in this world. I'm really not a huge fan of all of that because you can make yourself look like a totally different person.
Literally like the Kardashians.
Yeah, I mean, filter and all.
I don't watch the Kardashian stuff, but they've got like all these sisters and then I think they have another sister, like someone who I've never seen before. And I realize that it's the tall one. And I don't think she's that tall. Who am I thinking of?
I don't know. I don't watch it. I'm sorry. I don't.
The poor gal is probably a pretty petite, like 5'10", but she stands next to her sisters who are like 5'1", and she looks just like a giant, the poor gal. Anyways, she always uses these filters, and it looks like they have another person in the family, but it's actually she. But anyways, you're not into those facades.
I'm not. I am really big on being authentic. I like purchasing from people. I like following people who are also authentic or seem authentic, people I can trust. And so I want to be that same type of person.
You worked for a chain for a time.
Yes, I did.
Was that the impetus for getting the hell out of the chain, or was it a good experience, or march me down? Because then you went to chain, to some independence, you got the itch, you started doing your own thing, you're going to grow into a huge corporation. Was the chain the impetus, or was it like, yeah, that was a great experience?
It was actually a really good experience. I was with a chain who was kind of on their way out. I was there for several years, but it was this beautiful, in my experience, it was this beautiful blend between corporate retail pharmacy and independent pharmacy. And so I was able to see, the hierarchy and all the people that are involved with district managers and people above them and billing departments and meeting metrics and quality calls and, all of those things that we see in corporate community pharmacy. But at the same time, I knew my patients and my volume wasn't so high that I wasn't able to breathe and I wasn't able to know my patients' names or what they were dealing with or their disease states and really have an impact. So it really did marry the two very nicely. But the sad thing was they were, and I knew it, the writing was on the wall that they were on their way out. And so when they started turning part of the lights off throughout the day, I knew that it was time for me to to find a new job.
Literally, right?
No, literally. I would walk in, and at first I was wondering to myself, why? I wonder if like half the lights are broke. That's really strange because it was like one row was on, and it was every other row was on. And then this was consistent. And I thought to myself, I think it's probably time for me to start putting out feelers.
When you say it was kind of an independent feel, is that because it was smaller than a huge chain, or what gave you the sense that it was a little bit independent-ish? Is that because you got to see some of the operations, or what?
Yeah, so I was hired as a staff pharmacist right out of school, and I was quickly put into the pharmacy manager position because that pharmacy manager had left, and it was a fantastic opportunity. And I think the reason I say it was able to kind of have that independent feel is because it wasn't such a high volume, and I was still getting tech hours, so I had plenty of support. And also my district manager there was fantastic. It was like that blend of guiding you and helping you with what you needed, but also leaving you alone to actually do what it is that you're there to do instead of being micromanaged, which I think a lot of us can really relate to. None of us want to be micromanaged. We want to see if we can sink or swim, right? And so he really, he was a big piece of that, I think, because he really allowed me to kind of make the mistakes that I needed to grow, but also allowed me to really be successful in the areas that I was able to be successful during my time there.
Was this manager a pharmacist?
Yeah, he was. I think that was a big piece of it too.
I know other chains have pharmacists, some as district manager. So what quality do you think he had to let go the reins a little bit? And do you think he did that on purpose, knowing that it would make for a more engaged employee? Or do you think it was just dumb luck that this guy wasn't as engaged?
No, I think he was engaged. I think there was something about what he saw in me possibly to kind of relinquish a little bit of control and just let me kind of take the reins. Also, he did put me in like one of the biggest failing stores in his district.
That sounds like me, but it's usually after I've been there a while.
So, in a sense, there was only room for growth. But also, he was very clear in what he wanted. So, I feel like that's part of one of the things that made it successful, because if you tell me exactly what it is that you're looking for, then I can usually figure it out. But it's the people who are vague or are all flighty and don't really even know where they're going. That's really hard to take direction from.
What quality do you think he saw in you to let go the reins a little bit?
Well, I actually moved out of state right out of school. And so this move was 5 hours away from what was originally home. So I think there's a sense of maturity and independence that you automatically get from somebody who might be doing that. And also, too, I think just as now the employer, people coming right out of school have something exciting about them. They're
not jaded.
They're not jaded. They haven't been ruined by life or some terrible job that they've already had. You know what I mean? They're excited about it. They're excited. And so I think that's probably what he saw, my excitement.
Pharmacy is kind of a good job to do that. Because it's a licensed job, you can get someone relatively fresh who's not jaded, but you know that they know everything because they had licensorship. That might not be the same in some professions, but yeah, pharmacy, you can get the proof that they're good without the baggage sometimes. It's funny you mentioned about the light, because I have dreams about our pharmacy before we remodeled. And this is years ago. It's like 25 years ago before we remodeled, when I first started out there. I have dreams about coming into work and turning more lights on, and the team that was there not having all the lights on. And I keep trying to say, was that possible? Did we not have all of our lights on? And I think we always did. I think we always had our lights on, but for some reason in my dream, I'm coming in and I'm turning more lights on. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I was your manager in an earlier life or something. I don't know. I'm not old enough to double you, so that can't be it.
No, absolutely not. It was a very weird thing. As soon as I started to see that happening, I knew it was time to start looking for a different job. I like to be prepared. You know what I mean? So the last thing I was going to do is go down with the ship. I had to get out.
It sounds like the Titanic, actually, with the lights blinking from the freezing water and so on. You take off from the chain, but it was more of a running, not in a negative sense, but it was more of a leaving something than maybe going somewhere. But you did end up in some independent stores.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and it wasn't really a negative thing. It really was just looking at the pharmacy industry and knowing where something is going. That's really what it was. And so I always wanted to be a pharmacist at an independent pharmacy. I had done a lot of work with independent pharmacies when I was still in school. So I shifted to an independent pharmacy, which was an incredible experience because I started there as a staff pharmacist and then transitioned into their lead compounding pharmacist because they did compounding and they even had a DME department. They had all kinds of things, and it was a great next step.
What's the main reason why you wanted to go to an independent?
The level of patient care that they give.
Maybe even without finding that independent, kind of across the board, you knew that they maybe had more interaction, thus care.
Yeah, absolutely. Independent pharmacies are kind of known for that, and they know their patients' names, what they have going on, and really just they tend to go the extra mile. They take the extra step, and they usually have time to do those things, or they figure out a way to make time to do those things. And whereas it's really unfortunate, actually, with a lot of the corporate community pharmacy settings, we're getting to the point that it's almost like a factory. Just go to any of your local places. You could barely get a pharmacist if you tried. And so I knew that is not the route I wanted to go if I could prevent it.
It's interesting because when you think about marketing of chains versus independents, it's like when I go to a town, I'm usually stopping at a McDonald's because Joe's Burgers across the street, I just don't know if they're above average or below average with service and price and quality and things like that. You don't know, and that's why McDonald's has done a great job. It might not be great, but it's probably not terrible. With independent pharmacies, I'm always concerned that when people see us in town, for example, that we might be great, but maybe I'm off somewhere drag racing in my Jaguar. I don't have a Jaguar, but I'm going to pretend I do. I'm off drag racing in my Jaguar, and I'm not looking at certain prices and things like that. All of a sudden, someone comes in and they just get this far out price and, crappy service because there's nepotism in there and somebody is pissed at this or that because of the internal squabbles and all that in a small family thing. Stuff we talked about. The point is, Does someone from out of town know that? Or are they just going to say, give me these McDonald's / national chain store because it's probably average? But I think you and I are both saying that average service is probably going down.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And you have a really good point. I feel like independent pharmacies, really, you don't know what you're getting. You're right. Depending on what zip code you're in, it really could be a crapshoot. And you could hit the lottery, or it could be the total opposite.
Could be worse than the chain, right?
It could be way worse. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You get in somewhere that just hasn't changed in years and they got some old cranky, it could get worse.
Oh, it could definitely get worse. And we do a bad job as a profession in general at advocating for ourselves. But when it comes to independent pharmacies, sticking together and being an entity like you're talking about that people can know and trust and go to regardless of where they are, we don't do a very good job at that either.
Someone comes in, they don't know what they're getting. If you were in charge of everything, what would you tell independents to do to raise that middle of the line awareness for potential, let's say, new customers or people in the area that somehow might eventually be your customer?
I think the industry is changing so much right now that that's a little bit of a challenging thing to answer, but I will tell you just at face value to keep your store up to date, because I'm sure you've done it. You've walked into pharmacies and you think to yourself, when is the last time they have reset their shelves, or they have some old sign that's been there for 50 plus years, and not in a good way, not in a historic district, cute little pharmacy sort of way. And that reduces trust instantaneously. I mean, you figure we're up against these huge entities that are remodeling, thousands of stores? They're doing it for a reason, because the aesthetics of it matter.
I look around at I always talk about fast food places on this show. You'd think that's all I do, because here we go. You look at Wendy's and stuff like that, and they remodel, and you're like, I don't think they need to remodel. No, they look fine to me, with their 25-year-old light oak chair rail. It looks fine to me. But then you see these new ones, they get the titanium, this and that. The service still sucks a lot of the time, but at least they know that you got to keep going somehow, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people buy from places that look nicer regardless of the service.
You talked about your store at Kmart actually closing down, but a lot of times you get these national chains and maybe their whole focus isn't pharmacy, and then you get a pharmacy inside of a pharmacy. And I'm not going to mention names here, but I think there's a national chain pharmacy that people kind of like to work for. And then another pharmacy kind of came in and said, we're going to be the pharmacy for this department store. How do you think that goes over?
That whole thing really broke my heart, to be honest with you. It was a shame that it happened. I know why it happened. I honestly think it was a really smart business move on the department store's end.
Because they weren't known as a pharmacy chain.
No, they weren't known as that. And I can't help but wonder, did they see the writing on the wall? Did they see the lower reimbursements? Did they see the DIR fees coming in? And did they think to themselves, we're better off renting out our space than we are dispensing medication? So I do think that on the business end of it, it probably was a very strategic and intelligent move on their end. But it breaks my heart because the people who worked for that department store really tended to love their job. Especially when I was coming out of school, everybody that wanted to work in retail was trying to work for that company because the environment was really nice. The workload was a good amount of work. You weren't slow and bored. You weren't overly worked. You had enough support staff. And now it's not like that from what I hear. You very rarely hear anything good about that pharmacy chain when it comes to people actually liking what they do.
The problem with that is I can sit here and I can say, yes, they should do better. Well, I don't give a crap. I mean, but as an outsider, as our pharmacy soap opera talk, it's they could do better. But then I'm like, all right, well, maybe they had to do this and maybe it has to work this way before they started turning the lights off, like with Kmart. Some could argue maybe they have to do it that way, but I think we can maybe agree that there's a difference between tightening ship and having people hate you and have the industry know that you're maybe cutting more and doing more than is needed. And you look at the corporate profit of these places and you say, well, maybe they didn't need to cut that much.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when the chief executives are making tens of millions of dollars, if not more than that, I honestly don't even know what those numbers are, and you can't even get a couple tech hours a week, it doesn't justify itself. And I understand where you're coming from, because again, you need to run a business, and in order to stay in business, you need to be, financially intelligent and make sure that you're not overpaying your staff. But I think we've tipped the tables to the complete opposite side, where, pharmacists are working 12, 14-hour days without any lunch break. Now that's changed. And then also to your point about, maybe they're doing this for financial reasons. I would believe that, except for now, do you notice that we're seeing like $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 sign-on bonuses?
I haven't seen those. Are they doing that?
They're technically retention bonuses. I think they're being packaged as sign-on bonuses. But it's like, if you commit to so many years with these companies, they'll give you, I think in one particular state, I can't remember which one it was, but they're offering $100,000. And you have to think to yourself, though, as a pharmacist, what exactly am I walking into?
Yeah, how bad is it to sign up that you need that?
Yeah.
I had a employee many years ago, and he ended up working for GM or something, and then on to some Whirlpool and different places like that. But he said that it was known in some of these bigger companies that hire engineers that they just run them to death. And we talked about pharmacy earlier, that you have a certain level of competency with the licensing. Is that just happening? They're getting in some of these licensed people that are, wet behind the ears, and they're just running them to death, for a few years. Is that the trend? Are we seeing a lot of new pharmacists ending up in these places when they're kind of have the handcuffs of they have their education, but now they have to pay for it?
Yeah, I think so. And I understand that misery of having an enormous amount of student loan debt, and mine was less than what I'm hearing people are coming out with now. I'm hearing $200,000 and $300,000. Some students are coming out with, some pharmacists are coming out with student loan debt. And so you can definitely see why somebody would even take a company up on their offer and just say to themselves, well, I'll just do this for a couple of years. But I don't think we realize, even as pharmacists, how detrimental that is to our health in general. Even just a couple years of that grind is absolutely terrible for our health.
So now you're at an independent pharmacy that hopefully you're a little bit above average in customer service. When you went there, Kristin, was that fruitful? Did you have more time with the patients and so on? Did you find what you were looking for there? But what was still missing?
I did find what I was looking for there. It was a very, very wonderful transition. Like I said, I went into an independent pharmacy that was doing more things than I was doing in my previous position with compounding. I've always loved compounding. And we had a DME department and, all of the things. And I had time to actually get to know my patients and get to know some of the local doctors and make recommendations. And I really felt like I was having an impact, especially with compounding. Once I became the compounding pharmacist, that was really where I was truly starting to kind of get into my career and love what I was doing, because you are really able to customize and meet the needs of the patient walking in the door. But the thing that was missing there was, I really like to be challenged. So I wasn't being challenged at the extent that I wish I I was. And I also was not allowed to do a lot of the different things that I wanted to bring into that pharmacy. We weren't really seeing eye to eye on kind of where the business should go. And it seemed like they were really happy with where they were, what they've been doing, and they were just going to continue doing that. And I saw the potential of what it could be. It was already this amazing thing, and I could see how it could be even more incredible, not just for the business financially, but for the community.
How long were you there?
I was there about 3 years.
I think that if this played itself out again, different people, different scenario, maybe a different product line and so on, I still think it would just have been a 3-year step before you moved on. True?
I think maybe. But also there's a part of me that thinks that if they were willing to take my ideas and implement them, that I would probably still be there.
Are you glad they didn't?
I'm very glad that they didn't.
Right?
Yes. I truly believe the universe, everything happens for a reason. I really and truly believe the more I live, the more experiences I have, that everything happens for a reason, and the universe might do some things in some very weird ways, but the end result is always better than the original.
Take your orneriest day back when you were working for the Independent. Put yourself in the worst mood day that you can think of. And now think of what you felt when they weren't moving with the things you wanted to do. I don't care if it's fair or not to them, but what are some of the orneriest thoughts you can think of? Or maybe you didn't have them. Maybe you're just like, well, it's their business.
You know, there's a big piece of me that wishes that is the type of personality that I have. I'm a little bit more aggressive than that. I don't mean to be. I think it's passion. It's really passion that's shining its head or rearing its ugly head. But sometimes it comes across in a little bit more of a negative light. But I would say that you could just see that I was physically upset, and I would try to hide that and mask it as much as possible. But it really started eating at me. You could see it in my personality. You could feel it whenever I was there. And when you start to not like yourself, you know, again, you're like, oh, something needs to change.
You know the term, like when people say, it's none of your damn business, none of your business, none of your business. You know the term, right? It came from people saying, truly, that is none of your business. This is my business. You don't own the business. That's your business. So people always talk about, let's have a meeting with the employer and share my ideas and all this kind of stuff. And sometimes it's just like, it's none of your damn business. It's not your business. In your case, though, and it can be approached a couple different ways, at minimum. In your case, did you approach them, or did you just say, that's not my business, and just seethe inside because you were pissed and you wanted things to change? What direction did you take?
No, I talked to them multiple times, multiple different approaches, private meetings, just, casual conversations. I tried it in a couple different ways, but after a couple years, it became very apparent to me that, like you're saying, it was not my business. It was physically not my business, and emotionally, they did not want my opinion. So it wasn't any of my business, and that's fair. And it took me a little bit of time to accept that.
It's fair now, but what thoughts? I want to hear it. What were you thinking, even if it wasn't rational, until you get to the point where you say, it's their business, it's their investment, I'm an employee. If I don't like it and they're not open to it, thank you. I'll put my notice in. No bad feelings. I'm going to move on and do my thing. That might be where you end up. But what were you feeling? And then was it rational for you to feel that way?
Probably disdain. I hated that they would not take any of my ideas and try to bring them to fruition. I couldn't stand how closed-minded they were.
Why were they closed-minded? Were they old farts, or were they too much family input? What were they closed-minded about?
I think sometimes you're so successful for so long as the owners, it doesn't really matter.
Don't rock the boat
anymore. Right, exactly. And whether the boat the revenue boat, the profitability boat, whether that's the, slowly sinking or not, because I truly believe that it was. You've done so well for so long, it really doesn't even matter. But when you're in a smaller community and you have this ability to actually make like an incredible impact and be that go-to place for healthcare and change and be this like boutique wellness hub that I was envisioning, and you can't look past the nose on your face, it bothered me to no end. And there came a point where I realized I just needed to step away from this.
How much did you plead your case, or was it all kind of in private and maybe you were building up a reason inside of you to leave? You were building up your fortitude and so on. Did you ever get into a tussle with them, like a verbal tussle, or was it always just like, all right, I'm marking this off in my checklist in my head?
No, there was never any verbal altercation or anything that happened. No, absolutely not.
You were just storing it up.
Well, I mean, every time you start to have a conversation and it's declined, you kind of, I think we all do it. It's like there's a mark put back there, and then it happens again.
Did they decline the conversation or just your idea? Did they say, like, we're not talking about it anymore?
No, just the idea. And then once the pandemic happened, honestly, I want to say this is probably the last straw. There were 2 different locations. And when the pandemic happened, about 6 months into 2020, everybody was gathered for a meeting, and they were told, we're closing this smaller location, which was the original location, this like 80, maybe 90-year-old location. And we're just going to consolidate to one because it's not really all that far away. When really it was, I truly believe, because of lower reimbursements and DIR fees. And I can't help but wonder, if you were going to bring in clinical services, whether it was my idea or someone else's, I don't care that it was me trying to preach, we need clinical services. But I can't help but wonder, if they were to bring them in, I truly believe that store would still be there. We need to save our independent pharmacies, because in case nobody's noticed, they don't want independent pharmacy in the healthcare game anymore. They're trying to get rid of compounding pharmacy. They're killing with reimbursements, and we need to shift to clinical services, or else it's just going to be one more pharmacy that closes.
Here's my beef talking to you. You're talking about how important it would be for them to take your advice and why they were dumbasses for not doing it. At least that's what you were thinking. You didn't come out and say it. And you get all this energy up and you say, I'll show them. I think I read that you were at 2 independent pharmacies. After all that grandstanding inside of yourself, you just go work for someone else.
So I had alluded to some student loan debt earlier. So I had a lot of student loan debt. I had over $100,000. I actually graduated with $175,000.
That's about average, I think.
Yeah. And if you're anybody who's had that amount of student loan debt, it's smothering. And I wanted it gone. I was doing literally everything in my power to try to get rid of my student loan debt, aside from literally working every hour of my life. So I was in a position where I wanted to stay in independent pharmacy and felt like the place that I was going to would allow me to have that impact that I was like really yearning to have. And that was the main reason that I shifted from one independent pharmacy to another.
How far away?
I ended up going from like a 2-minute commute to a 50-minute commute.
Different city and so on.
Yeah, different town entirely.
All right, so you go there hoping that you can do more. How did that turn out?
I was kind of running into the same issue. And
did you think to talk to these people before you joined? Or did that not even cross your mind?
No, I did. I had a very blunt, candid conversation with this owner, and I really thought that we were aligned, because I wouldn't have left if I knew that it was going to end up the way that it did. And so I can't deny the fact that I wonder, is there a piece of me? Is it me? Is it my approach? Is it my, let's call it passion? But also, too, I do wonder, is it the independent pharmacy owner that is reluctant to change?
Well, there's a couple things. It could be the change. It could be, was the second place desperate to get somebody?
No.
They weren't. So they weren't blowing smoke just to hire you.
No, they weren't. I think she really wanted to, I think she really liked the ideas. She liked she wasn't even doing immunizations. I think she really liked the idea of bringing somebody in to do, your adult routine immunizations. Maybe we start to do some point of care testing. I was doing her MTMs through outcomes. Basic things like that weren't even happening. So I was really excited to kind of bring them in, but it was hard to implement because I wasn't the final decision maker, which I knew going into it. But when you're not the final decision maker, you realize that somebody else has to obviously sign off on what you're doing. And I'm very respectful in the workplace. Like, I know what my position is. And so I wanted her to tell me what was okay, what spending was okay, where we could, what we could create, what we couldn't create. And there was just a very large disconnect. And also, too, what I realized is I think regular meetings could have probably mitigated a lot of the issues, because when you're working off shifts and you're never there at the same time, you can never have conversations about the projects that you're working on. Like, there's a reason that people, especially larger companies and successful companies too, they have meetings. And it's because you need to have everybody on the same page.
Was that a stall tactic on their part by not having the meetings, or it just never happened?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. To this day, I don't know the answer. But that's one thing that I try to pull into my own business. My goal is to have weekly meetings that are 15 minutes or less. And it's not just a place where the employer is dictating to the employees everything that they should do. I want it to be more of a dialogue where people can come to the table. They know that we're going to have a set meeting, and this is where I can bring ideas to the table. This is where we can talk about things that aren't working. This is where we can talk about things that are working, that reinforce those good things. Maybe pat some people on the back because we're all working really hard to meet this one common goal, and also to be a nice touch point for the projects that you are in the middle of creating. Because in reality, when you're being innovative and you're trying to do things that other people aren't doing, you have to continually communicate about what it is that you're doing, what step of the process that you're on, where you're going, when you plan on getting there, and so on and so forth, in order for it to be successful. Otherwise, it just doesn't happen.
When did you get to that place and say, oh, crap? It's like, was it like a week, or was it like a day or a month, and you're like, the crap, what the hell am I doing? When was that? How long was it in?
It's funny because I was really excited for the shift and to create these cool, new, wonderful things in that area. And the day I started, the one technician went out on maternity leave the day prior. So I was down a technician when I started the new job. So I feel like that was a sign in and of itself that because we operated for about 2 months with one less technician that we needed. It was very busy.
Well, how long did that last then? What was the timing on that?
So we're looking at fall of 2020 when that happened. So again, we're kind of almost a year into the pandemic. And during all of this, I would say for the last 5 years, 5 years from now. So let's say 2017, 2018, I really started to look into like clinical services, whether I didn't know what I was going to do with them, but I was looking into functional medicine. I was looking into point of care testing. I wanted to do something more as a pharmacist. I didn't know what it was, but I've always known from the beginning that I didn't want to be attached to a product. Like, we as pharmacists are attached to dispensing medication. And so clinical services just really are where my mind has always been. So anyway, fast forward to 2020, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm in an area where you can't barely find any COVID testing, and I and thinking to myself, I have a solution to this problem. So I open up a COVID testing site.
While you're still at the other place?
While I'm still at the other place.
Did they know?
Yes, she did know. Again, very transparent, blunt, very open conversation with her.
Transparency, it's a good thing, but you don't always like what's on the other side. You know, it's like me being in a glass shower and my kid coming in or something, you know. It's like you can be transparent, but the answer's not always there. So she allowed it, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you want to call it that, then yes, she allowed it because we definitely had a conversation that I was working on my own business at the same time, and that was agreed upon ahead of time. So the testing center was way more successful than I could have ever dreamed it being.
Were you putting in double time?
Yeah, I was. I was juggling working for her certain days of the week. And on those days that I worked for her until like 6 o'clock, I would then have the testing center open from 7 to 9 at night.
Would you say you were full-time with her?
Yes, I was full-time with her.
You were?
Yes. It was a 36-hour full-time. So I would work about 4 days, but on the other 3 days, I'd be open during the day. And then on the other days where I was working for her, I would then be open at night at the testing center.
You leave the chain, and what I'm hearing you pulled from that is you liked your manager and you realize that he gave you some room to breathe and you kind of like that. And I imagine you're bringing that into your business. Was there any good at all from those two independents, or did that suck? Is the only benefit of that just knowing that you don't want to end up like them? And be honest. Don't fluff it. Was there anything you pulled from them?
Yes, I loved working for both of them.
I said be honest.
I know. I pulled a lot from them. I pulled, if we're going to focus on the negative, maybe.
Well, who wants to talk about positive stuff? If you talk about positive, no one believes you. And we don't want to be negative to be like we're gossiping. We just like the negative stuff because it's more interesting. It's more fun to talk about.
It is. Well, and you learn from the negative.
You learn from the negative.
Everything I learn it the hard way. I don't know why, but I always pick like the most difficult route to learn it.
Okay, so was there anything actually good from those places that you pulled, or was it only good because you're comparing it in the light of what you do now? Was there actually good that came from it?
Yes, absolutely. The first opened my eyes to functional medicine. I was sent to a bioidentical hormone replacement convention, and that really opened up my eyes that there's a different approach to health and wellness outside of medication and surgery.
They sent you there. You have these ideas, and they're like, no.
Yeah, it was very weird. They spent money for me to get this certificate. They spent money sending me to a live couple-day convention. And then when I got back, I was able to do hormone replacement therapy consultations with patients. And once I really started doing that, that's when I realized that I wanted more of that and less dispensing.
Put yourself in their shoes. They send you. And are they saying, let's get Kristin the hell out of here for a while. We can't take her pressing this. Let's get her out of town and then bring her back. It's kind of like they were placating you, kind of like toying with you, giving you some room, but then they just didn't want to do it.
Yeah, I don't know. I really felt like the relationship was really good until closer, maybe like 6 months to a year. I would say probably about a year before I left. I felt like it was a genuine relationship, and I feel like that they did want to be that service to the community.
But it was hard for them.
Yeah, it is. It's hard for you. And especially, I see it, as an older owner, as an owner that has kind of not really, if the business has been handed to you, you've been in business for 40 plus years under your own ownership. I could see how it would be difficult to listen to this person that you barely know coming into your business and presenting different ideas that you don't see any other pharmacy barely doing. So I respect that. I really do. But at the time, it was slightly infuriating.
All right. Second one. What did you take from the second job?
The second job, I was a little butthurt about how that one ended, to be honest with you, because
Butthurt? What is that?
I was butthurt. Butthurt. You've never heard the term butthurt?
No. Butthurt?
Let's Google that real quick.
Is it butt like the anatomy butt?
Overly or unjustifiably offended or resentful.
Boy, we got to get that one down.
Yep, BUTT. It's an essential piece of your vocabulary.
So you were butthurt on that one. Why? It seems like the second place kind of got under your skin more than the first one did.
Just because I thought that it was very clear as to what I was coming there to do.
Right.
And then that's not what happened. And I really feel like it was because of lack of communication, not really on my part. And you mentioned transparency before. And there is a double-edged sword to transparency. You get to hear what the other person is thinking, but then you need to be able to respect and also accept the fact that you might not like what you're hearing. And I feel like we have a very difficult time doing that as humans, especially in our world today.
Last week, I made an hour change at the pharmacy. I changed our hours. And there's some people that probably thought that I would have mentioned this before I did that. And they changed to the benefit. We shortened our hours, so everybody's happy about it. But I think there's some that thought maybe we would talk about it. And I didn't. I just changed them because I didn't care what anybody else thought about it because I'm the golden goose and I got to keep myself happy and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't pretend like I was trying to be transparent and pretend like I wanted input and stuff because I knew exactly what I was going to be doing, even for this rather large choice for the business of changing our hours. Is that where you're going, that she pretended like she wanted input, but then wasn't going to do anything with it?
I think that's fair. I think that she had the intention of doing all of these things and then maybe didn't realize the number of decisions that she would have to make or the amount of money, albeit honestly, in the grand scheme of things, very small, less than $3,000, that would have to be spent in order to make these different clinical services happen. Like, you can't just do point of care testing and not spend anything ahead of time. So I'm not sure. So
she kind of had ideas, but she maybe got cold feet. Hard to say.
It is hard to say. It's very hard to say. Part of me wonders if she just wanted a staff pharmacist and knew that I was reliable and that she could trust in the fact that I would be there and handle what needed to be handled and fill that position for her. But I just wanted more. I just wanted more. That really is all it is. I don't know. In retrospect, looking back, I don't think that it's any of what anybody else is doing. I just really feel like I want to create something.
I've got a handful of kids. No matter what I do, some of them are going to disagree with me just because I'm their dad. I could give them the world and be like, oh, dad gave me the world. Some things, they're just not going to be happy because that's innate in children. They're supposed to see things differently than you do because that helps them leave the nest and so on. So in your case, you might have had a perfect situation. You didn't, but you might have had a perfect situation, but you might have even been looking from the inside for something that wasn't going right as the impetus for you to get out on your own.
Yeah, and it actually took two of my close pharmacist friends for me to actually pull the trigger and actually leave. Because you start to rely on that salary. You rely on it. That's one beautiful thing about being an employee is that it's always there. You know, every 2 weeks, you're going to get that same check, and it's very reliable and it's very comfortable. But I just had to finally cut the cord.
So you open your place up, and now you've got 3 employees. What kind of things do you think your employees could be talking about you, like when they're in their, I call it like the teacher coffee lounge, you know, all this stuff that teachers talk about in the coffee lounge. What kind of stuff do you think people might talk to you about and you're like, oh, I might have talked that way in the past too, but now I realize this as an owner that it's not really fair to me. You know, what kind of things do you think people could say about you? Or maybe some things that you said about them, but now that you're an owner, you're like, I should have been maybe a little bit easier on them.
Yeah, so I could be a little scattered sometimes. So I feel like that might be one thing. You know, it's kind of hard to follow where I'm maybe going. So I'm constantly trying to remind myself of like what the focus is and what we're trying to do, what our goals are, and where we're going. But also to being a little, I don't want to say disconnected, but I am very aware that I hate being micromanaged. And so I don't want to micromanage my employees. But there's also a very fine line with that as well. Because if you're not micromanaging, then there's also the complete opposite, which is not managing at all. You're just not managing. And so I could see them possibly thinking I might be a little too distant. So that's also something I'm very aware of and trying to. They don't teach us how to be business owners in pharmacy school. And so even when maybe you are innovative and maybe you want to be a pioneer of something or do your own thing in whatever way, once you venture into business ownership, you've just entered a totally different industry. And there's a lot of things that I don't know how to do. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that.
So what you've done is you've taken some of the stuff that you've learned, some of the experiences you've had, and then you batched up your business/management into a new company that you're helping people that are maybe in your position learn some of the stuff you've learned.
Yeah.
With that in mind, you've got this online course, but there's 3 things that you did not put in the online course because you thought it was going to maybe ruffle some feathers, maybe come off wrong. Maybe you thought it sounded a little bit bitchy, you thought those things. But what 3 things do you really wish you would have known 5 years ago? What would you have told yourself? Anywhere from watch out for these kind of people to keep this focus in mind.
I would say the first one would be that it doesn't have to be perfect. Just create it. Whatever idea you have, just create it in whatever fashion you're able to create it in, because as pharmacists, we're very analytical. We're type A. Everything has to be perfect, and it does not have to be perfect in order for it to serve people and for you to have an impact. The second thing would be that the second thing that I would include is to make sure you have all your consents and legal documents in place, because people may duplicate your work. And the third lesson I think would be to not listen to people who tell you that what you're doing is stupid, or it's never going to work, or you can't do something like that because you're a pharmacist, because you're going to hear that probably all day long, especially if you're venturing into the world of clinical services and collaborative practice agreements, and maybe you're trying to push the envelope with provider status. There's a lot of healthcare practitioners that don't want pharmacists in that kind of space, but we have every right to be there, and you've got to turn off the negative noise in order to get where it is that you're trying to go.
All right, we got to delve back into number 2. Was that on the consulting side or earlier when you started your own business?
It was on the consulting side.
Oh. And so you were helping, but then some of it got swiped.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, that's a difficult pill to swallow, that's for sure. But, the sad thing is that the person who duplicated the course was actually one of my very first students. So it was a beta. It was a beta test.
Yes, and you didn't maybe have all that copyright stuff.
So I didn't have any of my copyright stuff in place. I didn't have any of the terms and conditions. Because again, when you're creating things from nothing, then number one, there's a piece of you that doesn't realize that you need it. And number 2, Lawyers are extremely expensive.
Yeah, well, they got to pay for those cars we talked about earlier.
So,
this wasn't just someone who took your stuff, but took it and then did their own consulting kind of thing with this.
Have since duplicated, yes.
Oh, that's too bad.
So, and that's, again, we go back to what we talked about, earlier, is authenticity and transparency. I am who I am, and I'm extremely genuine. I'm extremely transparent. Maybe, I was once told that your biggest weakness is usually your strongest strength. And I love that because I think about that when it comes to me with transparency, because I'm usually a pretty open book. I'm very giving. You usually know what's on my mind, but sometimes that's not really a good thing. And so I think about that with that instance. All I wanted to do was help a fellow pharmacist create their own testing center and their own, community. And then it was duplicated so that it could be sold. But
I think in the long run, your openness and transparency, that pays off. Not in the short run, maybe. But I don't know if I agree with the biggest weakness, because my biggest weakness is like a quart of Breyer's vanilla with the black beans in it. I'm not finding out how that can be my biggest strength, but I'm going to work on it.
I think that's a good thing to work on.
Well, Kristin, golly, thanks for spending time.
Yeah, I hope people can take away some of the lessons, and I can learn the hard way for them in some instances. But thank you so much. It was great talking with you.
Keep doing what you're doing for the profession. Thank you for your transparency. A lot of people are learning good stuff. Nice to meet you. We'll talk again soon.
Nice to meet you too.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Business of Pharmacy podcast with me, your host, Mike Kelzer. Please subscribe for all future episodes.